On behalf of our president, Dr. Wong Chi, and the board of directors of the U.S. China Policy Foundation, welcome to the annual Foundation Gala. It's really a pleasure to see so many old friends tonight and see so many supporters of this very important relationship between China and the United States. And I want to thank Ariane and the staff for arranging what I understand is a terrific menu. So I've been around long enough to know that you shouldn't make a speech in front of a hungry crowd. You don't want to stand between them and their dinner. So I'm going to sit down and just say, bon appetit, and enjoy yourselves. Well, continue to enjoy your dessert, those of you who haven't finished it yet. And we here at the Foundation every year try to recognize individuals who have made a profound contribution to the Chinese-American relationship. We honor those individuals for their accomplishments, but we also honor them for their work in furthering understanding between the Chinese people and the people of the United States, and furthering the understanding between our two governments. And one of the individuals who's done a magnificent job of that is Dr. David Lampton. Dr. Lampton has been instrumental in explaining to the American people and to other academics the importance of the relationship between our two countries, China and the United States. And he's one of the foremost scholars in research on China. Dr. Lampton received his BA degree and master's degree and PhD from Stanford. He's presently the Hyman Professor and Director of China Studies at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. He also heads the SAIS China School that oversees all of the School of International Studies presence in China. He's the author of many books, many scholarly studies of China. The latest is entitled Leaders Ruling China from Deng Xiaoping to Xi Jinping, published in 2014. Dr. Lampton, that's quite an accomplishment to cover from Deng Xiaoping to President Xi. So it's my pleasure now to present to Dr. Lampton, on behalf of the Foundation, our award for Lifetime Achievement Award in U.S. China Education, presented to Dr. David M. Lampton by the U.S. China Policy Foundation, November 17, 2016. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you, Ambassador Sasser. I'll say Jim. And good evening, everybody. I hope people in the rear can hear. In any case, thank you to the U.S. China Policy Foundation for inviting my wife, Susan, and me here this evening. We're both thrilled to be among so many friends and to also gratified by the acknowledgement of the foundation. I'm particularly pleased to share this evening with my fellow honorees, friends of long standing, Secretary Barbara Franklin and Ambassador Cui Tiankai, as well as United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Secretary Franklin, when I was really starting my career on the East Coast in New York, was a mentor of mine in New York City, and I've always been appreciative of the help she gave me and was such a constructive board member on the National Committee on U.S. China Relations. Ambassador Cui is a graduate of SAIS and was a student with my predecessor and a great scholar, A. Doak Barnett. So it's particularly great to be here this evening with the ambassador, who's such a good friend of U.S. China Relations and certainly the foundation. I want to start by saying a few deeply felt words about our hosts, Ernestine and Wang Ji, because they've made enormous contributions to the public understanding of China. And their work goes well before the foundation's founding in 1995. Their labors go back, and particularly Dr. Wang Ji, to the foundation of the China Collection for the Library of Congress. It has over 1 million volumes and is the biggest holding of any collection outside of China. And so when I was a graduate student, of course, the Library of Congress was one of the most remarkable collections for research, and I think all scholars of China really owe Dr. Wang Ji an enormous debt of gratitude, and this foundation is just the latest expression of his commitment to that relationship. Turning to U.S. China relations just for a minute, it's obvious to all of us here that America's just concluded a very grueling election. And the voters have spoken, but not much productive, realistic, or enlightening was said about China policy during that marathon campaign, except to raise red flags about tariffs, alliance management, and military spending. Our national debate did not focus on the central questions our new executive and legislative branch officials must now address. In Beijing as well, an important airing of views about China's domestic and foreign policy choices also is underway. Long ago, Britain's Harold Macmillan reportedly was asked what blew even the steadiest ship off course as history unfolded. And his perhaps apocryphal response was, "Events, my dear boy, events." Our just completed general election is just one such event, and we can be sure there are going to be others. The tectonic plates of post-World War II order are shifting because of tumultuous domestic political developments in China, the United States, and around the world. The post-World War II free trade order is under pressure. World trade and trade in commercial services shrank 14% in 2015. Treaty arrangements in East Asia are fraying. Regional proliferation dangers are mounting. Central Asia and the Middle East are seemingly in endless turmoil, and the European project is searching for a way forward. Amidst these swirling events, we must return to strategic first principles. We must keep two different ideas in our minds simultaneously. The first is that strategic foundations are essential for the management of U.S. China relations. But we also must keep in mind that our two countries have now a relationship between two societies, not just two governments and not certainly just two leaders. Our two societies' interdependence provides dynamism and durability and creative potential that are our relations' greatest strengths. These linkages among our local governments, companies, and civic organizations remind us about how much there is in U.S. China relations to celebrate. One opportunity to come out of the recent elections, for instance, is that about 34 state governorships are in the hands of Republicans now, who are generally free trade and investment oriented and likely to be dedicated to stable, productive economic and cultural ties with China. What are the strategic questions on which we both should focus at this moment of transition in both of our countries? In the United States, I would ask, the U.S. policy in the Obama administration asserts that we don't have to choose among our challenges to security and in other realms. There's North Korea, ISIS, terrorism, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Russia, and China. They're all currently mentioned as central challenges, although somewhat over different time frames and in various ways. I would ask instead, do we have the luxury of not choosing among our threats, of having no priorities? And if we must choose, is China reasonably placed on the list of threats with others? The first obligation of leadership is to bring commitments into alignment with resources. Not doing so fosters anxiety among our allies, our friends, emboldens competitors, creates domestic confusion, and gradually bleeds our national strength and resolve. There are only a limited number of ways to achieve alignment between our resources and our commitments. Reduce the threats, reduce commitments, multiply friends, or expand our financial and political resources. We have to do all four. In my view, China's best viewed as a competitor with whom we can deal, not an existential threat now or any time soon. Second, an enduring national interest of the United States has been to seek a sovereign, cohesive China and to prevent a circumstance in which the Eurasian continent is under the dominance of any single hostile power or powers. This has been the lodestar of U.S. policy, whether past challenges came from Europe in the 19th century, Japan in the first half of the 20th, Soviet Union thereafter, or our more current problems involving China and Russia. If this remains a defining national interest, that we want no single power dominating the Eurasian landmass, then how does driving Moscow and Beijing together by putting pressure on Europe from one end and China from the Pacific end on the other serve that objective? I also want to ask Beijing a question, and that is that while China has achieved dramatic increases in its national strength over the last 40 years, and the international system has made and should continue to make room for China in global institutions, would it not be preferable for China to stick with the core features of Deng Xiaoping's strategy, namely, reassure your neighbors and reassure the world beyond, so that China can focus on its pressing internal problems and focus its popular energies on the protracted task of China's national renewal. Demographic trends in China and the gargantuan task of rebalancing the economy all require all the attention China's leaders can devote. Of all the shared interests between China and America, the greatest is our common need for national development and renewal. The quickest way to a better relationship with Washington is for Beijing to improve ties with its neighbors. Recent moves towards peaceful management of maritime issues with the Philippines and Malaysia, in my view, should be, and I believe are, welcomed in the United States. These are two right steps in the right direction. By way of conclusion, I want to ask both sides two additional questions. First is, how can we cooperate to increase the density of economic and security institutions in Asia in which we both are participants. And second, are not the transnational problems the world faces becoming existential security challenges in and of themselves, whether we consider climate change, global health, or the need to jointly contribute to the management of the world economy. Elevating our shared strategic gaze to the global level will be difficult, but it is essential. So once again, I want to thank the Foundation for the honor and thank all of you for attending and supporting the important work of the Foundation. And thank you for listening to my views.
Good evening. It is a very special pleasure for me to have this opportunity to introduce the recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award in U.S. China Relations, which will be conferred on former Secretary of Commerce, Barbara Hackman Franklin. I have been a friend and admirer of Secretary Franklin for nearly 25 years. As the 29th Secretary of Commerce under President George Herbert Walker Bush, she led a presidential mission to Beijing in December of 1992 at a time when I was the U.S. ambassador there. Beijing was a lonely place for American diplomats in those days. For nearly 3 years, the U.S. government had banned high-level government-to-government contacts with China, the sole exception being the contentious visit of Secretary of State James Baker to Beijing in November of 1991. A few months before her visit, President Bush, in an effort to facilitate his re-election in the presidential elections in November 1992, had made the decision to sell F-16 fighter planes to Taiwan, a move that China considered a violation of the August 17, 1982 joint communique between China and the United States. It is fair to say that this was not the high point in U.S. China relations. In any event, President Bush's move failed. He was not re-elected. Bill Clinton won the presidential election, and he had been, as a candidate, highly critical of China, comparing Beijing to Baghdad. I find the only similarity between Beijing and Baghdad is that both names begin with a B. In any event, this cast dark clouds over the outlook for U.S.-China relations. Against this background, President Bush decided to resume high-level economic talks with the Chinese, and he asked Secretary Franklin to take on this task, which she did with enthusiasm and perhaps an element of trepidation. Together with her counterpart, Minister Li Lanqing, Secretary Franklin reconvened the 7th session of the U.S. PRC Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, which had been suspended since 1989. Her visit helped finalize nearly $1 billion in signed contracts for U.S. businesses and paved the way for the explosion of U.S. trade and investment with China that began in 1993, reflecting the recognition by the American business community that China was firmly back on the path of reform and openness. Throughout her visit, Secretary Franklin conducted herself with skill, courtesy, and professionalism, demonstrating that she had immersed herself in the details of the U.S.-China economic relationship. I was greatly impressed. That visit alone, in my prejudiced opinion, would justify this Lifetime Achievement Award and 1,000 more like it. The reality, however, is that for Secretary Franklin, this was simply another significant accomplishment in a lifetime of extraordinary achievement. When she graduated from high school in her hometown in Pennsylvania, she was the class valedictorian, the president of the student council, captain of the field hockey and tennis teams, and a cheerleader, a role she could still perform with distinction today, but not tonight. On graduation from college, she became one of the first women to be admitted to Harvard Business School at a time when women constituted 2% of the entering class to the Harvard Business School. She graduated 2 years later with an MBA and then spent several years working in the corporate world before President Nixon recruited her to fill a position aimed at bringing more women into high-level policy-making government positions. In her first year alone, she tripled the number of women placed into policy-making positions in the Nixon administration from 36 to 105. She created a talent bank of 1,000 qualified women for future openings, and more than half of the positions that were filled by women under the program that Secretary Franklin was promoting had never been held before by a woman. The numbers expanded out to include many positions long closed to women, such as sky marshals, tugboat captains, FBI agents, and forest rangers. It was in this environment that the U.S. military, for the first time, began to promote women to become generals and admirals. These accomplishments led President Nixon to nominate her as one of the first of 5 original commissioners of the Consumer Product Safety Board. She went on to serve in a variety of other government commissions before becoming Secretary of Commerce under President George Herbert Walker Bush. She was the most senior woman in the Bush administration, and she was only the 13th woman to hold a cabinet position in the United States. After serving 5 U.S. presidents with distinction, Secretary Franklin was in high demand to join the boards of major U.S. corporations, and before you know it, she was cited by the American Management Association as one of the 50 most influential corporate directors in the United States. I cite these facts to illustrate that she deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award in many different fields and not simply in U.S. China Relations, but I am greatly honored, and I ask you to join me in welcoming Secretary Franklin to the podium. This is a Lifetime Achievement Award in U.S. China Relations presented to the Honorable Barbara Hackman Franklin by the U.S. China Policy Foundation, November 17, 2016. Barbara, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Stanley. That was just perfectly wonderful. I'm going to give you another hug. Oops, we just dropped the plaque.
You voted for a photo. Yes.
Oh,
Here we go.
sorry, we were messing up here.
You want to say a few words?
Yeah.
Want me
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you. I'm breathlessly overwhelmed, Ambassador Roy. That was incredibly generous, and I thank you very much. And I have to say to you that you are a star in the firmament of U.S. China relations for your insight and wisdom over many years, and your career in the ambassadorial roles you've held. And I will always be grateful to the assistance you gave me during that mission in 1992. It was absolutely invaluable. I'm eternally grateful. And I do want to salute my old friend, Dr. Wang Chi. and Ernestine and this foundation and the wonderful work that you have been doing all these years to build many different kinds of bridges throughout both societies. It's really important work, and it really counts. Thank you. And of course, the great Mike Lampton. Mike, you're wonderfully eloquent as usual tonight, but Mike, to me, could get any number of lifetime awards for building the U.S. China relationship. You're one of my heroes in that whole arena. And of course, I'm honored to be here with the Secretary General or his representative to have the same kind of award, or this is a different award, but to be in the same arena with him. And of course, Ambassador Cui, always a pleasure to see you. I want to thank my wonderful husband, Wally Barnes, who's over here and who has been so supportive over the years of my China work. Thank you, Wally. Well, in coming here, and of course, Stapleton Roy started this, I wanted to turn the clock back in my memory to 1992, the week after the election. And of course, as he told you, President George H.W. Bush had lost. The President called me and asked me to undertake a mission to China. I was surprised, I have to admit. The reason, of course, is because U.S. China relations were at such a low point and had been since the events at Tiananmen Square in 1989 and the 8 sanctions that the U.S. had placed on China. And there had been some very tough rhetoric aimed both at China and President Bush during that 1992 campaign. But the President explained that he wanted one of those sanctions removed, the ban on high-level government-to-government contact, because, he said, it would be more difficult for the new administration to build the relationship with China if that sanction were still in place. So, I was to go to Beijing and reconvene with my counterpart, the U.S. China Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, JCCT. And as Stape said, it had been moribund since 1989 because of that high-level contact ban. Doing that, reconvening JCCT, would signal a normalizing of commercial relationships between China and the U.S., and that was a quite insignificant situation back then. And it would bring the entire Sino-U.S. relationship into hopefully a better place. So the purpose of that mission was clear. Time was of the essence. The Bush administration would leave, we would all leave in January. It was now mid-November. So we did what we had to do. We put a delegation together, a small one as these things really go to now, and we prepared like mad for this trip. Now the Commerce Secretary, as you may know, does not have an aircraft. Secretary of State does, for example, and so do some others, not the Commerce Secretary. So the President made available to me, so that I could go in style to Beijing, an old Boeing 707. Now that plane was so old that it was not equipped with a GPS. The pilots were using handheld GPSs to fly that aircraft. And I learned that afterward from my husband, who is a pilot. And I can only say I'm glad I didn't know any of it while we were on the road to Beijing and back. Anyway, we did not make a lot of public announcements about this trip, but the word, of course, got out. And that brought out some negative feelings about China that were prevalent at the time. From the right side of the political spectrum, Senator Jesse Helms from North Carolina, if any of you remember him, called me and said, "You should not go. They are communists, and we should not engage with them." And then from the left, there were those who were very concerned about human rights and were angry with China. So at the outset, given that situation, This mission was bound to be controversial, and quite frankly, it was. Now, I was also mindful that there was a diplomatic aspect to this trip, but that I was not the Secretary of State, I was the Secretary of Commerce, and I had better develop some business for U.S. companies. And so I sent messages to our Chinese counterparts before we left about the new business relationships I hope we could form while we were there that would be a win-win for both sides. We left Washington in mid-December, arrived in Beijing, had very productive meetings with the Chinese side, led by Minister Li Lanqing, whom I liked very much, and we worked quite well together. I had a cordial meeting with Premier Li Peng. And the result, as Ambassador Roy has told you, about $1 billion worth of contracts were signed between U.S. and Chinese companies while we were there. Now that sounds like not much today, but back then that was a nice healthy amount. And more business flowed afterwards, and the JCCT working groups got going again. Well, then we came home. I wrote a report to the President and the Congress, and we left office. And that was that. Only in hindsight, years later, did the significance of that mission come into full view, at least for me. It was a turning point that began to get a productive relationship between the two countries back on track. It gave a green light to U.S. companies eager to explore business opportunities in China, and they did. And the trajectory of trade and direct foreign investment really took off after that. So now, here we are today, 24 years later, and the economic relationship is so large, so complex, so multifaceted, so interdependent, and so very critical to both sides and to the global community. Today, it's the very foundation of the U.S. China relationship, which is the most important bilateral relationship in the world today. And it's really rather amazing when you think back, despite the rough spots in all these years, and the differences we have, and we do have some differences, great progress has been made working together. So the relationship between our two countries is vastly different and much more positive today than it was in 1992. And that's something we shouldn't forget. Now, this election here is over, and a new government is in formation. It's a hopeful sign that President-elect Trump and President Xi Jinping have talked, and from the sound of it, have expressed a willingness to work together. My further hope is that the two presidents will talk regularly and often, that they will build a personal relationship, that they will identify areas of agreement where the two countries can work together and do that, both for the short term and the long term, and that they will also identify areas of disagreement and look for some common ground there too. My hope is that our new president will appoint people who understand and have experience with China, and that on the Chinese side there will be an equal desire to work with the U.S. counterparts. And finally, for those of us here in this room, we all have friends and colleagues on the U.S. side, on the Chinese side, or both. So as this new government takes shape here, and as there are perhaps changes in China next year, now is a time to motivate ourselves and our friends and colleagues to do whatever all of us can do to help this relationship between the two countries move forward in a positive way. I'd like to think that we would all leave here tonight with a determination that we will do just that. Thank you so much for honoring me. This means a lot.
I am greatly honored also to have this opportunity to confer a Global Peacemaker Award on His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations. Secretary General Ban is not able to be with us tonight, so the award will be accepted by Mr. Robert Skinner, Director of the UN Information Center here in Washington, D.C. But let me say a few words about Secretary General Ban. For the last 10 years, he has been the UN Secretary General, a position that has been described by a former UN Secretary General as, quote, the most impossible job on earth, unquote. Before becoming UN Secretary General, Ambassador Ban had a long and distinguished career as a South Korean diplomat, rising to become his country's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade. His many important assignments included serving as National Security Advisor to the President of the Republic of Korea, Ambassador to Austria and Slovenia, and Chairman of the Preparatory Commission for the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. A very diverse individual. No one is more dedicated to the ideals and principles of the United Nations than is Secretary General Ban. Early in his tenure as Secretary General, he played a major role in persuading the President of Sudan to allow UN peacekeepers to enter the Darfur region. Subsequently, the UN Security Council approved sending 26,000 UN peacekeepers to join 7,000 troops from the African Union that were stationed in that troubled region. In carrying out his duties, Secretary General Ban has not tried to steer clear of controversy. When he has felt it necessary to do so, he has spoken and acted in ways that have led to criticism, but that reflected his strong beliefs and principles. This has not altered his courageous determination to carry out his responsibilities, in the course of which he has given primary attention to climate change, economic upheaval, pandemics, and increasing pressures involving food, energy, and water. Very basic issues for all mankind. His particular concern has been addressing the plight of the world's poorest and most vulnerable people. In recognition of Secretary General Ban's dedication and commitment, at the conclusion of his first term, the UN General Assembly unanimously re-elected him to a second term, which will conclude at the end of this year. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Robert Skinner to receive the Global Peacemaker Award on behalf of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon.
Thank you, Ambassador Roy. I'm truly humbled after hearing that introduction and those words about Secretary General Ban to be here representing him. And I'm truly honored to be with such a distinguished group of diplomats. As a former Foreign Service officer myself, I have such great respect for the work that so many at this table have done and are doing. And thank you for that. And of course, Secretary General Ban would have loved to have been here this evening to share in this award and share in this evening, but I think as many of you know and was indicated in the introduction of the Secretary General, he never stops working. I've traveled with him. I know he literally never stops working, and he's continuing and will continue to do so through December 31st when his term ends. He has indicated he will work until midnight on December 31st before he finishes. And I feel honored. I have hosted him here in Washington on his last 4 visits. We're hoping we'll have one more visit to Washington before his term ends. But I've also had the opportunity and true pleasure to travel with him on his trip to China in July. So I know how deeply he values his relationships with the leaders of both countries and the importance of China and the U.S. and their bilateral relationship to the success of the United Nations. Without positive and dedicated engagement with the United Nations from both China and the United States, the United Nations just would not function like it needs to. And I'll now read Secretary General Ban's message. I am honored to receive the Global Peacemaker Award from the United States China Policy Foundation. Thank you for recognizing the invaluable work of the United Nations. Achieving international peace and security relies on strong relations between member states, not only to advance bilateral ties, but also to work jointly to address global challenges. Both China and the United States are founding members of the United Nations, permanent members of the Security Council, and great partners in the work of the World Organization. Their leadership was indispensable in achieving the landmark agreements of the past year, most notably the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Our shared challenge now is to translate these promises into tangible gains that benefit all people. This will require robust political leadership from all countries. The world continues to confront complex security threats, from armed conflict and violent extremism to governance failures and organized crime. We see terrible human suffering, the largest crisis of forced displacement since the Second World War, and divisiveness that seeks to put peoples into opposing camps of us and them. The United Nations will continue to look to the United States and China to continue to strengthen their commitment to the United Nations as we strive to build a world of peace, prosperity, human rights, tolerance, and opportunity for all. Thank you.
I would like to thank all of you for joining us here tonight. I think we are all aware that the outcome of the recent U.S. presidential elections has introduced many new uncertainties into the outlook both for the United States and for the global situation. But the elections have not changed one important factor, and that is the importance of the U.S. China relationship. I think we should be grateful to Dr. Wang Ji, who had the foresight 21 years ago to establish the U.S. China Policy Foundation, anticipating that the importance of the U.S. China relationship could only grow over the years. And I think that the importance over the next 21 years will probably continue to demonstrate the truth of that vision. President Trump or any other U.S. president has to take into account how vitally important it is, not just for the United States, not just for China, but the relationship between those two countries, our two countries, can affect people in the world more profoundly than perhaps the relations between any other two countries. I think all of you here tonight recognize that fact, and I'm grateful to you for coming here to celebrate this occasion. I would like to ask Dr. Wang Ji if he would like to say a few words.
I wanted to thank all the distinguished guests coming in to join this 21st anniversary gala dinner for the U.S. China Policy Foundation. And I also want to say it is so honored we have so many distinguished guests tonight. And we have Secretary Barbara Franklin. We have Professor Mike Lampton, my old friend. And we have Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's private secretary, Mrs. Skinner, to attend this 21st anniversary dinner. And I also wanted to say, I want to thank Ambassador Cui Tiankai coming here tonight to going to say a few words. later. And this is very important. The U.S. China Policy Foundation must have some kind of a good relationship with the Chinese embassy here. Otherwise, it wouldn't be U.S. China. We have pretty good relations with the American friends, especially American people in the United States. And we do need to expand our relations with American enterprises, Chinese enterprise in the United States. This is vital for our future of the foundation. And probably you don't know how many staff you have in the foundation. Dr. Lampton asked me, how many do you have? We have 4. 4 people to run the foundation for the past 20 years. I volunteer myself every day for 4 or 5 hours. My wife, this is 6 people running a foundation for the past 21 years. We are really non-profit. We don't make any money. We are doing the things voluntarily, try to promote understanding between Chinese and American people. I feel that's important. Official relations are very important, but people-to-people diplomacy is even more important. I'm also happy to see so many embassy representatives here. I met new ambassador from Myanmar. I also met ambassador from Nepal. Also, GCM from Singapore. Our involvement expand now to embassy from Asia and European countries. This is a kind of world organization. China become number 2 economy. This is important. We have to engage every country in the world. And I believe in a better U.S. China relations. That's why I've been doing this for the past, not 21 years, past 50 years. My first trip to China was June 1972. How many years now? I've been doing that ever since Dr. Kissinger sent me to China in June 1972 to develop a cultural education exchange with China. Now, more than 40 years, I'm still here. And I don't know how long I'm here, but I hope American young people and Chinese young people will continue to do this thing in the future. I want to say a few words about before. I also want to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't have a foundation here tonight, dinner tonight. Especially Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office, the Star Foundation, Micron, JR Simplot, Air China, Wanxiang America, and the business relation with so many other companies in the United States. These are the companies, also UPS and FedEx. FedEx, I saw tonight, Mr. Ralph Carter, our old friend. He's FedEx representative here. I'd like to see him again in the future. So this foundation, without this company support, we wouldn't be here tonight. And also, I want to thank the embassy representative here tonight. Also, I must thank Ambassador Sasser, Ambassador Roy, my old friend. I know him since 1956, long time ago. And we become friends, and now we're still friends also. Without Ambassador Roy, Ambassador Sasser, the foundation wouldn't be here today. So it's Ambassador Herbert Horowitz and our both active board members. And thank you very much. And I think I said enough, and I wanted to thank you everybody again, and since getting late. And I better let Ambassador Cui to say a few words.
I became so dazzled by the outlook for U.S. China relations that I skipped over a vital part of our program. So we have simply reordered the sequence of events, and I would like to ask Ambassador Sasser to come to the podium and introduce our final speaker.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Roy. And Dr. Wong, it's always good to hear from you, and you've done so much for Sino-American relations, for this foundation. We're all very grateful to you. It's my great honor this evening to introduce the Ambassador of the People's Republic of China, His Excellency Cui Tiankai to this group. I might say that the ambassador, prior to coming to the United States as the ambassador for the People's Republic of China, served as Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs in Beijing. And prior to that, he served as Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to Japan. Prior to that, he was Assistant Foreign Minister of China, and he also holds a degree from Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Lampton. So we're proud to have the ambassador here this evening. And I might say that the people of China are very fortunate to have a diplomat of Ambassador Cui's intellect and diplomatic skills representing them in the United States. And we in the United States are very fortunate to have such a world-class diplomat in our country to interact with our citizens and with our government. So I'm very pleased to present to you the Ambassador of the People's Republic of China, His Excellency Cui Tiankai.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sasser, for your very kind words of introduction. And thank you, Ambassador Roy, for giving me the final words. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a special privilege and honor for me to join you tonight and speak here. Please allow me to extend my warm congratulations to the Foundation on its 21st anniversary, and also to all the winners of the Foundation Awards. The Foundation has been well known for its dedication to U.S. China relations and its role in building the bridges and promoting friendly exchanges between Chinese and American people ever since its founding. Its endeavor has helped to bring the hearts of our two peoples closer together and contributing to an ever-growing China-U.S. relations. And I want to pay special tribute to Dr. Wang Ji, to Secretary Barbara Franklin, Ambassador Stapleton Roy, Ambassador James Sasser, and Dr. David Lampton for your strong commitment to advancing China's U.S. relations over the years. I also wish to express my appreciation to the Foundation for the thoughtful choice of the venue tonight. The Mayflower Hotel is a good place to reflect on the history and look into the future of China-U.S. relations. Back in 1973, at the dawn of the normalization of our bilateral ties, it was in this hotel that China opened the liaison office in the United States. The Mayflower housed the office for 8 months and witnessed an unforgettable period in China-U.S. relations. Over the past 4 decades, under the guidance of successive leaderships in China and 8 presidents of the United States from both parties, China-U.S. relations have developed steadily through numerous challenges and dramatic transformations in the world. Today, we are conducting dialogues and cooperation in an ever wider range of areas, reflecting intertwined interests and complex interdependence. Effective formats have been established for our leaders to meet regularly for strategic communication. and over 100 bilateral mechanisms are at work for policy coordination and practical cooperation. Two-way trade, investment, and people-to-people exchanges are at historical highs. Military-to-military relations are also making good progress, contrary to some media reports. The breadth and depth of China-U.S. relations today are beyond anybody's imagination over 40 years ago, when the first group of Chinese diplomats checked into the Mayflower. The growth of this relationship has served the interests of both countries and contributed to the peace, stability, and prosperity of the Asia-Pacific region and the world at large. Our achievements owe a great deal to the hard efforts of both sides and the strong support of our peoples. And in this regard, I totally support the point made by Dr. David Lampton just now. The relations between the two societies are extremely important and helpful. Our two countries have clear differences in terms of historical background, cultural heritage, social systems, and levels of economic development. But over the years, we have cultivated a culture between us that enables us to continuously expand cooperation while managing differences in a constructive way. And in this regard, the importance of firm commitment by our leaders and genuine strategic communication between them cannot be overemphasized. In 2 days' time, on Saturday, President Xi Jinping and President Barack Obama will meet again on the sidelines of the 2016 APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in Lima, Peru. This will be their 9th face-to-face meeting since June 2013. And I have had the privilege to be present at most of their meetings and witnessed how a frank and sincere dialogue was developed and mutual understanding and confidence deepened. We look forward to the success of this upcoming meeting, not as an end, but as a new height in the close working relationship between the two leaders. And last Sunday, President Xi and President-elect Trump had their first conversation on the phone. President Xi said that cooperation is the only correct choice for China and the United States. As China-U.S. cooperation faces important opportunities and has great potentials, the two countries need to strengthen coordination, advance their respective economic development and global economic growth, and expand exchanges and cooperation in various fields so as to bring more benefits to the two peoples and make further progress in China-U.S. relations. President-elect Trump agreed that the U.S. and China can achieve win-win results and mutual benefits. He expressed his readiness to work with President Xi to strengthen U.S.-China cooperation. And the two of them agreed to keep close contact, establish good working relationship, and meet at an early date to have timely exchange of views on bilateral ties and other issues of common concern. And of course, there are other high-level meetings in the pipeline, including the 27th session of the China-U.S. Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, an institution Secretary Franklin used to lead. Thank you very much, Madam, for your historic contribution to that. We will also have the third China-U.S. high-level joint dialogue on cyber crimes and related issues. We should make full use of these opportunities and carry on the good momentum of the bilateral relationship to the next U.S. administration. Now, looking back at our accomplishments, we have good reasons to be proud and optimistic. However, our journey ahead may still be long and arduous. We still have some long-standing issues between us. New challenges may come up from time to time. Our relationship will go through more tests as our interaction gets closer. As permanent members of the United Nations Security Council and the two biggest economies in the world, the choices we are to make will have a far-reaching impact on the well-being of our peoples and the future of the world. And the most pressing task now is to ensure a smooth transition of China-U.S. relationship into the new U.S. administration and its sustained development in the years to come. How shall we do it? Let me try to submit a few suggestions for your consideration. First, we should put our people's long-term interests at the top of our agenda. On the first day of being elected General Secretary of the party, President Xi stated that the people's wish for a good life is our goal. This not only applies to China's domestic policies, but it is also true in developing our relations with other countries. And as a matter of fact, people's aspirations are similar all over the world, and governments should have similar goals. People in China and people in the U.S. all want better prospects in life, stable jobs, increasing income, good education, good medical care, enhanced social safety net, improved infrastructure, better environment, and so on. And both our countries are now faced with the tremendous task of implementing economic and social reform and restructuring at home. Both governments need to live up to the expectations of the people and deliver greater outcomes across the board. And in order to do all this, we both need a peaceful and stable international environment. Such common and long-term interests of our peoples should be what defines, shapes, and guides China-U.S. relations now and in the future. Second, we should aim at win-win results. Today, our interests are so intertwined and our interdependence so deep that the only choice before us is a win-win or lose-lose one. What happened in the past few decades has already proved that a thriving China is good for America, and a thriving America is good for China. The nature of our relationship should be mutually beneficial. In trade and economy, in education and culture, in science and technology, in people-to-people ties, in military-to-military exchanges, and in handling global and regional issues together. Therefore, we need to firmly reject the zero-sum mentality, which is not only morally wrong, but also discredited in reality already. Third, we should seek closer cooperation. It is clear that each country should shoulder the responsibility to tackle its own problems. But both will be better able to accomplish the job if we cooperate with each other. Engaging the talents, ideas, energies, and resources of both sides will yield more than either could achieve on its own. On bilateral relationship, we need to find new approaches to unlock the potentials and explore new areas of cooperation. In the Asia-Pacific region, we need to keep close coordination on our policies and work together to boost economic growth, promote integration, facilitate connectivity, and rein in hotspot issues. At the global level, we need to make joint efforts with other countries to address pressing and long-term challenges facing the humanity. China-U.S. cooperation is critical in dealing with an increasing number of such threats, from macroeconomic policy coordination to global governance, from environment protection to energy security, from disease control to disaster prevention, and from counterterrorism to non-proliferation. The list is almost inexhaustible. And I have to point out here that effective and mutually beneficial cooperation requires persistent efforts to build mutual trust. It is essential that we have a correct understanding of each other's strategic intentions in order to avoid misperception and miscalculation. We need more candid and in-depth dialogues and communications at various levels. Frequent and frank exchanges will further consolidate the basis of the relationship and inject more impetus to its future development. Of course, we fully recognize that it is almost impossible for any two countries to see eye to eye on everything at all times. What matters is how we manage differences and disputes. As our relationship is growing and expanding, most of the issues we have today, such as frictions over trade, currency, cybersecurity, and maritime issues, can be handled in a positive and constructive manner through deepening mutual understanding and enhancing coordination. This is the big picture we should keep in mind. If we learn to see these issues against the big background of common challenges and growing common interests in today's world, these issues will be in the right perspective. Then we will be able to find more rallying points than we could imagine otherwise. And China-U.S. cooperation in fighting cybercrimes is a good example. And ladies and gentlemen, to build such a relationship between our two great countries in the spirit of non-conflict, non-confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation is both a goal and a process, both in our common interests and representing our shared responsibility to the global community. We must show to the world that we Chinese and Americans are up to the job. In order to do this, we need not only the resolve and confidence to climb up to the top of the Great Wall in China, that's the words of Chairman Mao, but also the patience and wisdom of crossing the river by feeling the stones in the riverbed. That's the words of Deng Xiaoping. And standing at a new starting point, we are confident that China and the United States will make new progress in the bilateral relationship and bring more benefits to the peoples of our two countries and beyond. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Cui, for those very important remarks, and all the best.